Hey folks, it's Janek Gwizdala. It's the Janek Gwizdala podcast. Got something quite different for you in this episode and super interesting. As a huge fan of cards, of card magic in general, it was a great honor, a real highlight of my year to be able to sit down and talk to a master magician, an ex-touring musician turned master magician and world-class card handler, Jason Ladanye. We get into mentorship, into process, more importantly, trusting the process. We talk about the importance for both us as musicians and magicians alike about being in the room, about having a direct connection with your mentor, but also how you have that connection with your audience and how much more rewarding it is as an audience member, as a fan of either music or of card magic or magic in general, how much more rewarding it is to be in that room and to experience it live. Jason was immensely kind and generous with his time. We sat down at the Birdland Jazz Club in New York just last month, and this is my conversation with Jason Ladanye.
So it's kind of rare that you get someone who has had as many, I was going to say days, but it's actually years on the road as a musician and parlays all of that time into something so completely different. I want to talk, first of all, about what was the environment like on the road as you worked on this stuff?
Well,
and the kind of people you were around.
Exactly. The road is it's a family, and especially when you work at the level that Shamika was working at.
Yeah.
We were touring with BB. We were opening up for him. So you were just attached onto BB's tour, and they play $280 a year. So that's your new family.
We're talking never home.
You come home for 3 days, and that's enough to unpack, do laundry, and go back out.
Right.
And then in the first city you're in, you unpack your suitcase, and your clothes are still warm from the dryer from 3 days ago. That's how you know you're on the road too much.
Yeah.
So that life is just constant, nonstop, which means you have your best friends in the band. You guys have a routine, where you're going to get up and eat breakfast together, that you're going to take shifts driving, and where you're going to look for food to eat, and then you're sharing stories, everybody gets along. And there is 8-hour drive on a Monday, there's a 10-hour drive on Tuesday, there's a 53-hour drive to get to the other side of the country, and that's just nonstop.
Right.
And if you ever look at the calendar and see 3 or 4 days off, you might think, oh, cool, I'll go see those places. Nope, that's travel.
Yeah.
Those 4 days are, oh, I see. We're going to Poland, and then 4 days later we're in Rochester. Like, who booked this?
Well, I was going to say, was it predominantly in the U.S. starting out? With those artists, like Vince Converse you were with, right?
Yes. Well, Vince was all the states.
Okay.
But with Shamika, she was a little higher up on the food chain. She was signed with Alligator Alligator Records.
Right.
And which meant she was growing very strong, which meant anything that came in that was good, we had to do. Which means that when Europe dates came in, they were for a good reason, a big jazz festival or something. So that was like...
You were in push mode at that point,
exactly. Yeah. If it came in, we did it.
Right.
And because she was signed, we had tour support, which means that if a festival paid less than what we thought it didn't matter.
The label
because
would make it up.
The label says, we want you in front of that audience because we're going to sell tickets and CDs and things.
So it's interesting that the way you talk about it and the way I look back on your musical career was way more of being a band member than a sideman in a lot of respects. Obviously not the ultimate respect where you're getting an equal cut of the pay at the end of the night, but the amount of dates you were doing and how sort of dedicated it seems you were to the process feels way more like a band member than perhaps my career where I've been typically a sideman my entire...
No, you were in the band. Yeah, you were, that was, you could make suggestions about tunes. When they went in to record albums, you were on the, I think they didn't just hire a session,
That's great.
You're in the band. And then the songs, when you play that close and you are creative with everybody, the drummer hits something one night and you talk about it and say, let's hit that tomorrow. I have an idea. And everybody's creative.
So it's democratic.
Yeah, exactly. Everybody chose this is the way to go with that. Or something would start and we'd say, it doesn't work.
Nice.
So very friendly, And you were definitely a part of that band, not just someone hired to be like subbing on occasional weekends. I do that now. I do that with Fabulous Thunderbirds, Kim Wilson, yeah.
No kidding.
Who I'm a huge fan of, and I'm done with the road. But when he calls, I'm like, I just.
Well, I was
going to
say, are you doing any of that? So you are doing some gigs still?
Yeah, but a few a year. Okay. I just want to be on stage and watch him play and listen to it. It's fantastic. But I'm in no position in that band to offer suggestions about this. I just show up and play a couple of blues chops, and I'm like, thank you for letting me come to see you tonight.
Do you play at home?
Oh, absolutely. I have a Yamaha Grand at home that every morning I sit down and shed. I love it.
Amazing transition to how much of, obviously now it's going to be weighted way more towards the cards, but where did that shift? I mean, let's look at like teenage years of really learning the piano. I'm guessing you were in the Hannon or some book like that.
Yeah.
Okay, that was how, even as a bass player, that was my Bible too for technique. So that's many hours a day. Did you come from a classical background in general?
My teacher wanted that.
Okay.
So I had a handful of teachers. When I was 7 is when I got hooked with piano. We moved into a place that had just a piano sitting there. And I'd go down and play like the most outside. I knew that if I spaced my fingers out enough, I could get some interesting things. But if I pushed close together, it sounded awful. So I was probably playing some heavy-duty jazz.
Yeah.
Didn't even know it.
Wow.
But I just knew a combination of white keys and black keys and shifted around. And I thought I could do that for hours. And I had no idea what I was doing, obviously. But I also started cards at that same age.
Okay.
So I needed something to do. And so when I went to my first teacher, it was just like basic sight reading and things like that. But my first real teacher, Dan Dobek, he was a huge Chick Corea guy, and Keith Jarrett, guys like that. But he said, all right, we're done just reading. Here's your real book, and here's your Hannons. And I enjoyed the Hannons because it was like kind of a systematic math thing where I could just sit down and play.
Sure.
And not have to think about anything. I just said, here it is, here's the pattern, do it.
Yeah.
And I got some sort of enjoyment about how complicated they would get. And then when he played the next, I think it was divided into 3 sections.
Yep.
Right? So when we get up into like the 20s or something, like, ooh, this isn't even in time anymore. Like there's some extra notes at the end of that. And then my fingers, I'd be like, okay, so you're telling me on the way up, it's these, but on the way down from that particular run, I have to use these to set up for that. I enjoyed that kind of a thing where it was very complicated. And then, of course, standards was just learning the changes and the solos. But my problem was I learned how to play blues early.
Okay.
I hate to brag here, but I invented the pentatonic scale.
Very nice. You heard it here first, folks.
I really did. I'm not even kidding. My ear found it.
Okay.
And my piano teacher had some sort of like boogie tune. My first teacher, I was only like 7 or 8 years old, showed me this little boogie thing. But I liked the left hand part, and I just kind of found the notes through these sound good. But I got pretty good at messing around with that, you know. And I'm like, I found these notes; they all kind of sound good. And then she's like, "Oh, that's a scale," and I'm like, "No, these are my things." And then I was in high school or something like that, and I was goofing around on the piano, and my music teacher at the time came in and stood behind me, and I was playing the boogie stuff, and he came in and he started playing those lines, and I'm like, what is this? I created this. How do you know what this stuff is? Completely oblivious to everything. And then he was like, this is the pentatonic scale. And I'm like, no. So imagine you wrote a book.
Right.
Like you wrote a story, and it had characters, and it had a plot, and then someone else is like, oh, I wrote that too. Yeah. And you look, it's like an identical copy. Yeah. Wouldn't you be a little like, what is going on here? You know? So the problem the bigger story here is I really fell in love with blues and Ray Charles and that line between blues and jazz.
Yes.
So you get all the feel from blues with some interesting notes, but not all the way into jazz and not super primitive insane blues. Like I like really in the middle there. Yeah. And then when my teacher would give me these standards, I just felt blues all the time. And I would play it, and even when I would dip into the modes and things that he wanted me to, he's still saying, it's okay to go out. Yeah. Go out. And I'm like, but man.
Typical jazz teacher.
Listen to this. I could groove on that. Yeah. There's something about the simplicity and the space and the trueness of blues that's just in me 100%. And I really had to struggle to get out. And even to this day, I can sit down and play a slow blues and love it. Yeah. And I feel like, I'm getting experimental when I get with jazz, but I'm just almost phonetically doing it.
Gotcha.
It's not coming from here. It's coming from my head too much.
Yeah, I understand. And speaking of that, and the fact that you mentioned Chick Corea, he has this thing about knowing something rather than memorizing something. He talks about this quite a lot, in that you can read something from a piece of paper, you can even internalize it, But if you internalize it and memorize it, you still have a picture in your mind of that piece of paper. So when you go back to recover that information, you're still just reading the same page. It's just imaginary.
Yeah, exactly.
When it comes to the cards, where are you getting to the point? How many hours in, or months or years into the process of working on part of your routine or part of a handling technique? Is it second nature where you don't think? Because so much of your thing is like you talk through the entire show. Mm-hmm. There is seemingly no time to think. You know what I mean?
It's a very simple analogy. It's almost too simple to say it, but I will. Remember learning piano when your teacher said, let's do the left hand?
Yes.
And then let's do the right hand. And you would do the left hand until it was autopilot. And you got almost sick of it. Like, I don't want to do it anymore. And that's how I knew, especially with cards, I realized when I was practicing something, when I got sick of it, I knew I was in the right place. But if you just do it a few times and hope that's good enough, guess sure enough, when you start the right hand, it's all just going to fall apart.
Right.
So you would do the left hand, repetition, repetition, repetition. You do the right hand by itself, and then your first day trying the two hands together, super clumsy. The next day, super clumsy. The next day, a tiniest bit of improvement, which would help motivate you. And then same thing, like the next day, just like hardly anything. And then suddenly, Thursday, you wake up and it's like, oh, there it is.
Right.
So your brain is working in the background. So the analogy I'm making is with cards. You do the stuff with your hands so much. That's your left hand. So the cards just, it's happening. It's like you can just do it all and it's fine. And then your right hand is you talking and communicating to the audience and all that. And you can't be a robot.
Right.
I'm there
it's
in the moment
improvising.
with, I'm talking to people and saying things and responding and making jokes and things. But underneath, I can trust the process and know that whatever I need to do is going to happen because I've been doing it for so long.
Right.
But at the very beginning, you're nowhere near that.
And I want to make an example for everyone watching the Your Magic Castle show that's up on your YouTube channel. I'll link it below. Definitely go check that out after you finish watching this, because I know that room. I've been in that room so many times, obviously, as an audience member. It's tiny. I mean, we're talking 20 people or something, or maybe not even. The guy to your left, Aaron, he's very kind of stoic. The girl to your right, I forget her name, but she's very inquisitive.
Oh, yeah.
Then you've got drunk girls over here. Then you've got some people who don't say anything over here. So you're managing like 4 or 5 different personality types.
Crowd control is a great, if you're struggling on how to work with a rowdy audience, that's like a master class in that, because you have to, my number one goal for that is entertainment.
Right.
So if I'm getting into fights with these people or trying to let them talk or not school people on this, I have to be stern enough to get them to watch, but not too like, hey guys, can you stop talking? I'll ruin the show. Right. So, but then I have to actually keep the show going, because if I'm stopping too much to work with them, the trick is getting lost. Right. There's a premise that we have to follow. So it's a juggling act. If I spend too much time with the crowd, the premise starts to fade. If I just stick to the premise, the crowd's just going to talk over you. That's very complicated. But that routine, especially that routine in the castle, is one of the hardest things I've ever created. But I've done it. I can do that thing in my sleep. So that means I can focus just on the crowd and getting through to the end of that show.
Did you then, or do you ever have to deviate from the routine based on what's happening in the crowd?
Well, there's a question I ask sometimes, because I am only as good as my audience, right? So I can't, I did it in music too. You just made me have a moment where I realized that I used to do this with music as well. Vince and I once did a metal club. He's a blues band.
Right.
Sure enough, bring out all the pedals. I'll use my whammy a lot, and we'll crank the guitar up and fuzz it out for all this. And I'm thinking, no, they're not going to buy that. We're doing a 1-4-5 in G, bro. It's a metal club.
Just like the Blues Brothers playing the country club.
Yeah, exactly. Chicken
Rawhide. Yeah.
So he just barreled through and did what he did, and did this tiniest bit of adjustment to try to get through it. But we'd realize that if a certain club was a certain way, we'd then tailor it. They just like blues, so we can't be doing these cover tunes. Let's stay with the blues. Or if we're getting lost on the blues, let's try something else. You ever had the great energy and you choose the wrong song at the wrong time, and the crowd just dies and you never get them back?
Yeah.
So with me, I have a lot of different stuff. First of all, I'm super edgy. I like the roast comedy and stuff. So I was doing some club in Boston once. I throw a couple stingers out, nothing back. So all right, it's a PG show, but I don't say that. I just realize, all right, this ain't that kind of crowd. Yeah. And then another one I notice is, or you'll be doing like, a bunch of poker players and high end, city hedge fund guys that are, and you do like a magic trick, and they're sitting there going, what is this?
Yeah, right.
Yeah, so they want poker,
Yeah.
right? And then you show up to the next thing and say, oh, it's that same kind of crowd I had last time. I'm going to do a bunch of hard-hitting poker stuff. And I do my first poker or blackjack routine or something like that, and they're like, can you make a card appear in your pocket? I'm like, oh my God. So you have to read your audience. So absolutely, you can show up with a game plan, but your audience is telling you what's working and what's not. So you can deviate and say, I had a bunch of gambling stuff lined up and ready to go,
right,
but we're going to do more magic kind of stuff.
Is there a line, like, how much you explain to the audience? I've listened to Penn Jillette say how good friends he is with David Blaine, but he kind of very much disagrees with the way David approaches it versus him. He's like, Penn's very comfortable telling everyone how it's done, essentially, and not leaving the audience thinking he's somehow mysterious or there's wizardry. And then Blaine is like more like, I need to leave them thinking that I'm like some kind of demon.
That's all style. So
okay.
what you're talking about is style. So that's just a personal preference. Me, I don't like giving anything away.
Okay.
But I constantly tell you I'm gonna, but then I keep lying to you.
Right.
And that's my character, just
Yes.
a total con man. And at every moment you get led somewhere and then you realize, wait, none of this is, well, I don't know what's going on. And I love that. And then of course I make funny after, like, what's the matter? Like, I told you this is this. You don't believe me? And then I prove them right through some ridiculous premise or something like that. But the whole thing is I want everything to remain a secret after. That's my personal taste. I'm not a big exposure guy,
sure,
but sometimes a magician will create a premise that has some type of exposure in it. Yeah. That's just not my style. What we do belongs in the shadows, right? So if enough magicians decide, all right, well, I'm just going to expose all this and expose all this, well, now you're just giving away, there's nothing left after a certain amount of time.
So a couple of things that brings up. I'm amazed at how low the view count is on a lot of exposure videos.
Well, people don't know what to look for.
Okay, so that's it right there. Okay.
It's as simple as that. Yeah.
Okay.
So there are people, magicians that know certain things that can write in, but it's in the search bar.
Yeah.
But if you take a deck of cards, shuffle it, and then separate all the reds from the blacks, what are you typing in the search engine?
Right.
What do you know, right? So it's difficult to do that. Where the exposure is the worst is when someone is on a major television show like America's Got Talent or something like that. And then the name of the video is now so-and-so exposed. Gotcha. And then because now that person, then some guy in his basement goes through and tries to break down all the stuff that they're doing. And that may get a lot of views because of that scenario. Right, but they're using that guy's name.
Right, it's like Shin Lim or something like that.
Yeah, exactly.
Huge,
learn Shin Lim's act or something like that. And
you
learn all the methods that he's doing, which is terrible, I think. That should stop. I mean, he built a career on that, so why should that be exposed?
Sure.
YouTube doesn't have to teach everything, like, relax.
It's amazing to me, the process. I've heard from other magicians. I've read your book. I've read a lot of things about the scene and, just people moving to LA, for instance, to hang out with Dai Vernon at the Magic Castle for so long and learn from him. And then, of course, Darwin Ortiz learned directly from Vernon, right?
And I had that trek too. I lived in upstate and he lived in DC. I didn't care if he lived in Texas. I'd drive to see him.
Right. So I read that you were driving back and forth from upstate to DC for some considerable amount of time.
20 years.
20 years. Unbelievable. And Danny De Ortiz tells the same story about taking the bus to Seville or something to Juan Tamari's place. Incredible. It doesn't feel like there's been any institutionalization of magic like there has been with jazz, for instance. There's no Berklee College of Music for magic. There's no North Texas State, USC, and any of that stuff. Why? I guess would be the question.
I'll tell you why, and it's unfortunate. To become a magician is a super low bar. Super, super low. You can go on the internet and buy a $3 trick and say, oh, cool, I can do this. And the thing that's separating me from doing that is $6. Cool, I'll put that in the cart and buy it, right? And then you do that, and you have 20 tricks, and all of a sudden you say, I'm a magician now. So I don't need to go see anybody, or it's delusional. So magicians, and then social media made it worse because somebody can put a $3 card trick on the internet, and the algorithm decides, let's give that 67 million views.
Right.
And then that person suddenly thinks, I'm a professional magician. And then other people say, that guy's got 75 million views, or 75 million followers.
Right.
He's good.
Right.
That's terrible. So you have to have this independent thing, and I talked to Darwin about it too. I said, how do you know if something's good? If you're just living life, how do you know if this sandwich is good? Or how do you know if this is good art? Or how do you know if this is a good movie? Like, how do you know? Yeah. And on some weird level, in our DNA is this thing that can recognize something that's good. Okay. So when I listen to blues or jazz, and I just recognize I don't know why I like Ray Charles so much, but I love it. I can't articulate. And then if you have a teacher, they can then, who's seasoned, can tell you, well, here's why you like it. His tension and, you don't know those things as you're learning music.
Absolutely.
Tension and resolve, and how he had a call and response, but didn't quite, he's using tension in a different way by not resolve. It's not just a note. He's leaving space here intentionally.
And the form of songwriting.
Yeah, there's like a million ways to, like, you can't figure that out on your own, but something in you says, I like this. Right? And then how your tastes change, right? The first time I had a sip of a beer or scotch or something like that. My first scotch, I brought it up to my face and I smelled it. And I'm like, oh, that's kind of okay. And then I went to sip it, but I exhaled and all the vapor like went into and I was like, oh my God, that's disgusting. Now it's like liquid gold.
Right.
So, and it's the same, and as a matter of fact, I don't even like that scotch anymore. I like more, because it was like a 10-year scotch or something like that at the time I thought was great.
Okay.
But then my tastes change.
Are you more of a Japanese guy now?
No, I'm a 25-year guy now.
Okay.
So once you start having the 21s and the 25s and you go back to like a 12-year something, the Macallan or something, a 12-year Macallan, you're like, it's okay.
Yeah.
So, but anyway, your taste changed. So I had that and I didn't like it. And then all of a sudden you do like it. So I have no experience tasting scotch. I just had to kind of figure that on my own. And the more you venture into it, you learn more and go. So with magic, a lot of people, for some reason in this industry, in magic, there are so many blind people that don't understand theory and don't understand the bigger picture and how to work with an audience and how to develop good, strong magic. We know this with music.
Yes.
What makes a song good and what, the guys that break the rules and all that, we understand how it's still working. But with magic, it's like blind and so few people have figured it out.
So would you say it would benefit from some sort of institutionalization, some sort of education of the audience?
The problem is we need people that know what they're doing to teach the good stuff. And what happens sometimes is that the people that are out there teaching it, they're clueless too. Right. And then people look up to them because social media has said they're good because they have 3 million followers. And that's not
it's insane to me how thin the line is from Vernon and Ricky Jay and Darwin and to you. If you made a sandwich and it was terrible, you're not going to make it in the sandwich business. If you open up a restaurant and you're serving horrible steaks, you're not going to make it. But in magic, you can do really lame stuff, and the social media eats it up. I think it's also true with a lot of music now these days.
Oh, well, yeah.
Especially with jazz music.
I should back up because I'm talking about good. I don't even listen to the radio anymore. What I'm saying, the music that we've been talking about this entire interview so far has been the real shit, like the real stuff that's stood the test of time.
Yes.
Anything today, I haven't listened to stuff since I left the road. Unless I can't.
Yeah.
I can't.
It's really crazy.
I can't process it.
I want to talk about the crossover. I want to get to the cards and talk about some of the techniques and maybe make some parallels. For me, it's the bass. For you, it's the piano. I'm 30-ish years into the process of bass, and it still feels like I have another 30 to go.
I love playing bass. It's I organ. I had the left hands.
Okay.
I had all the left hands.
Taking all my gigs.
I would every single day, and I get to keep. When I do the organ gigs, I say I want twice the pay. I'm doing the bass, and I'm doing the comps, and I'm doing the solos. So for me, that you're talking about the transition into this.
The transition into it, and like just the sheer quantity of time I know it takes as an amateur, as a massive fan of the cards, and having gone through that process with the bass myself to whatever level I'm at now. It's a fantastic amount of time that I think barely anyone really appreciates. Like we're talking about, we mentioned, the perfect shuffle, for instance, the second deal, like those kind of things. Give me a timeline of that. Like, are you like on the road with Shamika, with BB, working on all that stuff, just every day?
Absolutely.
Just killing decks of cards.
One question though.
Yeah.
Are we going to keep the trumpet player in?
Trumpet player stays.
Okay,
we're in
good.
Birdland. The mics are close. I'll probably edit that
because
out.
they're working. Well, it's going to be married to the track, but they're working on. They're putting their time in right now. So who are we to say we're doing an interview? But anyway, I started piano and cards at the same time. Actually, so I just was fascinated by cards. My older brother showed me a card trick. I had already kind of been messing around a little bit with things, but then he showed me a card trick with 4 jacks and 4 different levels of an apartment, and he knocked on top, and they were all on top. Nice. And my brain just went up.
Yeah.
And at that time, I lived at a library, and downstairs I had the World of Information at my fingertips, but there was like 8 magic books that I said, there was like, 20,000 books. And I said, I need to check these books out.
What is it with the medium of books that endures the test of time?
Well, I'll tell you what it is. I knew, because when I was a kid, I went to a magic shop, and I knew that I was spending $5 to get this thing that did something.
Okay.
The match would float on the card.
Yeah.
The coin would disappear and appear inside the matchbox. The ball would go through the block of whatever.
Yeah.
I spent money and I got a thing.
Uh-huh.
But even at 7 years old, I knew that thing on the wall was a book for $20, $25, and there was 140 tricks in it or something.
Okay, so massive value.
Encyclopedia of card tricks.
Yeah.
Expert card technique. Scarney on cards. All the card tricks. So I remember just thinking, like, I mowed lawns for 2 weeks to earn up enough money. Do I want to buy the cigarette thing?
Yeah.
Or do I want to buy the Royal Road?
Yeah.
Because look at all these tricks in here. And also I knew that when you would learn, you would learn a move, and that would sustain you for a certain amount of things. This is a reusable thing, where that trick was just a one-time
deal,
thing.
Yeah.
And also I'd been let down by magic so many times. The guy at the shop, his name was Peter Montecup. Going there with saucer eyes, and all of a sudden he takes this thing and puts these balls in, the balls into things, and he takes them up, and they're in a different. And he's like, "What order do you want?" And the balls are now in that color. I'm like, I need to have this in my life, right? So I buy it, and he says, "All right, inside here, there's a little plastic tab.
Yeah,
that's it.
Yeah,
and when you put the ball in, it doesn't go through, and that means the order's." And I'm thinking, what a letdown! Because here we went from sorcery to this alien thing that's unsolvable and beautiful to a piece of tape on the inside of the tube. And then the other one, he put silks in a thing, and they blow them in, and somehow magically they're tied together. And I'm watching these silks fall down, and they're like, when you put, they were separate, and then how the hell did you put like, please, let me buy this. And he's like, I see this little rubber band here, and I'm like, oh, man. So, and this happened over and over and over and over. And then I had a big cardboard box full of junk, and I don't mean to brag, I still have that box.
Nice.
I still have everything I ever bought. Everything
great.
I ever spent money on is in that box, and I'll probably in the future do some videos on these things. Because I remember these feelings of being so fascinated. Like,
absolutely.
the polka dots are gone from the can, and now they're on the thing. But I was let down, and when I realized when I bought the books for cards, the skill involved was not a letdown. The move, the secret was not a letdown. I was like, this is fascinating. I can do this and this and this, and this happens.
Had a life.
And I was yes, exactly. And there was no issues. And when I was out in my teenage years with kids, and they'd say, "Oh, Jay's going to do some tricks," the last thing I want to do is pull out a box of things and say, "Oh, here's something cool."
Yeah.
This I could do 25, 30 minutes, all one trick after another. I'll just go through everything, and people would be stunned. And I only had to bring a deck of cards, or they had one, or something like that. So there was a practicality I didn't know. I didn't know what that word meant, but I knew that just give me a deck of cards and I could do a bunch of stuff.
When we think about piano players, before we get to the cards, when we think about piano players, specifically like a concert pianist who has 5, 6, 7, maybe 10 concertos ready to go, Lang Lang or whoever it might be, how much would you say you have ready to go in terms of, do you class that by like a comedian by minutes? I've got type 40, a great 90. I have
different shows.
So it's different shows.
But also when I'm not on the road, I am home constantly maintaining not only the moves, but the effects themselves, because the premise and the justifications and the script and all that needs to be
like
ready to go.
And stuff.
Well, it's like on the tip of your tongue. Just like going through a standard saying, what's that next chord? You can't rely on muscle memory. Don't play a standard for 15 years and you tell me your fingers are going to go to the right changes.
Trust me, it happens.
So, and also, the weird thing about that muscle memory is, like, you'll be in it and they'll look at your hands and go, well, that's interesting. They're going right where they need to go. The moment you realize that you're not in, they stop and you go, I have no idea. You have to start the tune from the beginning to hopefully your muscle memory. You don't think about it. Don't think of, it was a G minor 7. Of course it was. So I don't want to be on stage going, gee, I hope this works. So everything needs to be maintained. And I'm constantly creating new things. And your master list gets pretty big. So I have lists of everything that need to be worked on. And off the top of my head, sometimes I'll be doing a show and think, you know what I want to bring back? I want to bring back this. I think would be good.
And you'll do it in the moment, or it's something you're thinking?
No. I never. Very rarely on stage. If I'm on stage making stuff up as I'm going along, we're in
trouble.
Yeah, we're in real trouble. So that's like handing me a foreign instrument and saying, you know, why don't you play on this thing? I'm like, I don't know what I'm doing.
Let's hear what you got on.
So I will say after a show, I debrief usually, and I'll say that this could have been this joke. I could have worded this. There's too many words in that punchline. Let me fix that. And I didn't like the amount of space I had here, and I'll fix that.
You record and film a lot?
I don't film all the time, but immediately after a show, I will typically take some notes on what I could have done better or what I need to. Just things like, I just the other night we did a show, and one of the punchlines, I had just too many words in there, and it got a little jumbled. And I think that the audience, I could have got to that last line a little quicker so they can digest that information better. So the comedy's all about like get all the unnecessary stuff out so you can just set it up and deliver without extra stuff, just like a solo. You know, what is all this? This is just you noodling around. So you play some fast notes there. That doesn't add anything to the mix. Every note should have purpose. So every word should have purpose. So, but in that debriefing, I'll say, you know, I'd really like to bring back that gambling trick I used to do where I bet money and play against, you know, let's bring that back. Because I don't want to be did you want to be in a band and play the same 5-7 songs every single night in the same order?
No.
So with my show, the same thing can happen where you just kind of start to, the audience loves it, but you're going,
here
pizza,
it comes again.
I love pizza, but you know, we're on the 15th night of having pizza. You don't like it anymore. Did you ever read the McKee book?
No.
Robert McKee? Yeah, he talks about the ice. It's such a great analogy. He just talks about one vanilla ice cream cone is great. Second one, it's good, but it doesn't hit like the first one. And the third one, I don't want this.
Forget it.
So you know, and too much of the same thing, and I feel like I want to be expressing myself differently. So I want to bring back old routines or bring in some of the new things I've invented. And that way I'm keeping myself happy and keeping the audience happy.
Can you give me an example of something that came from way back, like Vernon, and then through Darwin, and then to you, and something that you like added to a move?
Something I've added. Well, I don't know about to a move. Everything is kind of. Here's something interesting. It's not really about improving or anything like that, but everybody's hands are different.
Sure.
So I didn't know this, but I have like these really boxy. I have a big palm and kind of shorter fingers.
Okay.
You know, my Darwin's fingers were like a half inch longer than me, so he'd be able to do certain things. And when he'd say hold the deck like this, I'd like, well, how the hell do you get your middle finger up to that corner? And he'd be like, I just do. And I'd be like, well, here's the problem. So I had to adapt certain things. Like this is an Erdnase grip. I just had to adapt this into my hands because it wasn't exactly like it was in the pictures in the book, and it wasn't exactly what Darwin told me. Another thing is this particular move that he would use, Darwin would use his middle finger, and this is going to answer your question perfectly. Vernon did a particular move. I won't go into the move, but he did it with his middle finger. Darwin learned it from Vernon, did the same thing. There was not a chance in hell because there was no space between my thumb and my middle for this to work. But look how my ring finger is so much longer. So I just learned it with my ring finger, and after practicing for 3 months and not seeing any results, I then switched to ring and did it, and the move looked just as good. And I went to Darwin and said, is this okay to do, like, am I breaking some laws here? Because, you know, everything's so traditional and this move's supposed to be done this way. And Ed Marlowe worked 30 years to make it look this way. You can't just be doing that's what magicians do. They say, good enough, fools the audience. No, man, it might fool the audience, but you got to do it right, you know? Piano players, when they're hitting, they want this note, but they grab, their palm hits the keys and they're adding that clutter in there. Like, clean your notes up. So I learned that move with my ring finger, and he said that's fine. But it's about adapting, not necessarily improving, but I had to make it fit into my hands because everybody's hands are different. So there's a lot of moves that I had to really adjust because I wanted to get what the move is designed to do in the best possible way using these.
Was Darwin hard on you as a teacher?
The problem that I had with Darwin is there was no small talk or anything like that I had with my other teachers. And I would say the problem. It wasn't a problem. I had some wrong word. I just noticed this was different. And when I'd show up to my first teacher, we'd chit chat. When I was a very young kid. Then with same thing with Dan Dobek. There'd be a 15-minute warm-up period. How'd you do this week? Story time? I tell him this. I tell him, just life. Let's catch up. Just buddies. We haven't seen each other in a month. Let's chit chat. With Darwin, you'd walk in the door, you'd shake his hand, and you'd sit down and he'd say, all right, let's see the so-and-so, and I'd be like, I still had like sweat rolling down my back. He lives in DC, it's 103 degrees out. Yeah. You walk up a quarter-mile hill to get to his place from the hotel. Oh. And, my hands it's Darwin Ortiz, so you're sitting there shaking.
Yep.
And your palms are sweaty, and, you start doing the thing, and he says, all right, do this, change this, this looks good, all right, try that again. No, that's not it. And then he'd repeat things from my notes. So he'd say, remember to do this. And I'd look at my notes, and it's literally underlined what he just said. And I'd go, oh, you told me that last week. Yeah. And then we finish that, and then he'd say, all right, let's do this. The other thing we talked about. So I'd do that. And then there was never any, that's great. Fantastic work.
Okay.
He was the business.
Great.
These are the 4 things we did. Here's the things you need to improve. 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 I'll see you next time.
Yeah.
There was no, you want to go have dinner or
I think that method
nothing.
of teaching is a dying art.
Well, he was wired different. That his social, he had that. He's not there to talk to me about how my. He was. I came for lessons, so he gave me lessons. Right. That was Darwin to a T. Yeah. Like that. It took me 10 years before I worked up the courage to ask him if he wanted to go get dinner after the thing.
I was going to say, when did it?
Yeah, it took a long time.
Become more casual.
It took a long time because it stayed in that very, very strict. What was the movie with Jeffrey Rush? Shine.
Yes.
That it wasn't that crazy, but it was business. And I would hint at, you want to do this, or can I pick you this up at the store before I come up, or anything like that? And he would just say, sure. Right?
Yeah.
Do you want it this? And yeah. And then I bring it, and he'd open it up, and he'd take a bite out of it and say, let's see that thing. Like, it didn't buy me. It didn't buy you any time. Yeah, exactly. And then I would say, I started in 2001. I'd say around 2007 or 2008 is when I wanted to write my first book. Mm-hmm. And then we had a little bit more conversation instead of just technical things. Okay. So I stayed in that technical thing with him forever. And then kind of the next phase was more about improvement in writing skills, in comprehension, in scripting, and just so now we weren't with the cards in hand, so there was more talking, and that broke that thing a little bit. Yeah. And I finally worked up the courage to bring him to the Thai restaurant that he had talked about, and so then we went to dinner, and again with the small talk, there was like no small talk. I found myself saying something, and I get like a two-word answer.
You have to be on to the next thing.
Yeah. So then I'd make like little, like I'm on a 15-year-old kid on a first date or something like that. So I go to dinner and I have like a little chill. Okay, I'm going to talk about this, and I'm going to talk about this, and I'm going to. So I'd be like, so did this happen? You go, no, and I'd be like, okay. Hey, did you watch the thing the other day on the news? And, so we stayed there for a couple of years, and then by the time I'd say 2016, when I started doing shows and breaking out into my own, doing my thing, we were able to come down, sit down, chit-chat, talk about my personal life and things that had happened in my life. And then I'd ask him about his stuff, and he'd talk. And then we hardly even did card stuff. We just talk about, hey, this happened at the show the other day.
Well, I saw your video where you talked about your entire group getting together with Darwin.
There's only 5 of us. That's it. Right. In the world, 5 people got that close to him that they could sit down and he'd feel comfortable having them in the house.
And you said something like it took a day or 2 just to get to the cards.
Oh, yeah, exactly.
Because of stories. And
well, that's and the last few years, I'd say, once I started performing more, I had more in-depth things to talk about than, how do you help me with this move? We're so past that.
Right.
So it was, this happened at the show. Listen to how interesting this dynamic is between what I said and how the audience perceived it and my solution to it. And then we'd have these like really deep conversations about that kind of stuff. And that was very rewarding too. Yeah. And that only comes from him performing for 50 years, for him to understand my thing, and me performing for 10 years or 15 years to have that situation arise and recognize it. And then we could have these really in-depth conversations about connecting with your audience, really is a lot what those stories were about ultimately.
It's just amazing to me how small that community is that you have.
You got to go in deep to... Yeah. I mean, what do you think the conversations that Oscar Peterson had with other heavy hitters, what I mean?
It's like 4 or 5 people.
That's what I mean. But they're in that arena every night.
Yeah.
So when those 2 guys sit there, when 2 heavy hitters sit down, they can have those conversations at that level and understand what they're talking about instead of Oscar Peterson to a student.
Yeah,
that's a different conversation.
Absolutely. This conversation, I don't get nervous for anything. This conversation today, I am the person you described with the little notes and like just praying there wouldn't be 2-word answers. I knew there wouldn't be, but
we're doing good.
I'm like such a massive fan of this. So let's get to the cards. I'm currently working on a second deal. We talked about that a little bit before we started filming. First of all, are you using that a bunch?
Yeah, the second deal is, I would say it is a correction tool that you can use. Yeah.
Okay.
So you're not necessarily saying tonight, like Richard Turner is probably one of the best second deals out there.
Yeah.
But in his show, he is saying, let's talk about a center deal.
Okay.
And he demonstrates the second deal for the audience.
Okay.
And then he does it right-handed, and then he does it left-handed, then he does it...
And for people who don't know, he's also
one-handed.
blind.
Yeah. But he's showing like every permutation of how to do a center deal. But that is the demo. It's kind of like a gunfighter saying, all right, everybody, this is a such and such gun, and I'm going to hit that target down there. Now I'm going to do it blindfolded. Now I'm going to have one in each hand.
Yeah.
So it's that kind of a thing.
Okay.
To me, I'm doing second deals, but the audience doesn't know I'm doing it.
Right.
So
You're not explaining anything.
No.
Yeah.
Those are flying under the radar completely. So it's a very different show because he's putting it on display.
Yeah.
I'm sneaking it under the radar so people don't know what's happening. But if I find myself doing second deals if I need to correct something.
Okay. So you're hyper aware not only of where you can place all the, like when you're doing
that's why I've never used a second deal on stage in the last 15 years. No. That's actually pretty true. I've had to use it here and there to clean up some things. Sometimes the audience will do this, they'll shuffle the cards in a way you don't expect, or cards fall off, you ask someone else to wash.
Absolutely.
And, who knows what's going to happen. So my second deal is a tool in the toolbox when needed. You can use
because that's a massive variable. Like we as musicians deal with hecklers. Sometimes we'll deal with someone getting on the stage. That's pretty rare.
Oh yeah.
If there's chicken wire, let me sing is like just that your heart,
harmonica.
Yeah, your heart falls out of your boot.
And then they show it to you and say, "Do you have any songs in C?" Unaware that cross harp exists.
Yeah, just unreal. I was watching, and I wanted to talk a little about this, about the reality TV element of magic versus music as well. But I guess Penn and Teller's Fool Us is the most visible one, maybe the most known one.
Well, there are some. I mean, it's a game show,
right?
So that's not what I do.
No, of course not. I just wonder what your perception of that was as a magician from like the backstage.
It's a game. It doesn't have. It is a person performing something that doesn't really make any sense just to fool someone.
Okay.
So when I perform, I'm presenting a movie with villains and action sequences and a plot that starts here and has an arc and ends here.
Yeah.
And a magician trying to fool another magician does not have that. That's like watching a movie that was made for directors saying, look at these special effects. Can anybody guess? Was this
done.
CGI?
Yeah.
Was this practical? Was this a miniature? Do you want to watch a movie of 2 hours of special effects?
So for you, that premise is in the back room with Darwin and the small crew where you're trying to fool or share.
We don't even try to.
You don't do that.
I never cared about fooling him. I remember, this is a funny story. I don't think I've ever told this. I don't think I've ever mentioned this before. I was probably my 4th year in or something like that, and it was just lessons every time.
Yeah.
But I had created something that I thought may fool him. So I said, I'd like to show you something new. Because around 2005, 2007, 2008, or whatever, I started to create tricks that led to Confident to Set the first book. But then we ended up with, I had like 15 really good tricks, and he said, you should write a book. And that's when the relationship kind of changed. But anyway, I had created one of these things that's not in the book. I still keep it. I haven't published it. It's so good I haven't published it. But I spread the cards out. I have him. It could be his deck. Doesn't matter. He picks a card. He puts it in the box. We close it up. Nothing's ever looked at. The cards are shuffled. It's as clean as it can possibly be. It could probably fool those guys on TV, but I don't care about. I just don't have the desire to fool those guys. Right. So I say, "There's a 2 of clubs," and he goes, "Good." And I go, yes! I stood up and I'm like, yes! I fooled you. And I look at him and there's no expression on his face. And I sat right back down and said, here's how I did it. I did this, and he's like, and he's sitting in his chair and he goes, that's very good. And then he completely like changed the subjects and he's like, so let's talk about your other routines. Like there was no feed, nothing. And I felt like, oh my God, that's so rude. Like he's the Grand Master and I'm up there bragging like, oh, I fooled the master.
Right.
And so I took it back, but then he got me back really good.
Okay.
One of the first visits, 2010 or so, where Tony Cabral, all those guys in that picture,
Yep.
the first time we went down, that was the picture you might have seen.
2022
was
or something,
recent. So this is 2010 or so. We all got together. We're down there. The deck's shuffled a billion times. Tony cuts off a group of cards. Like, he just cuts off anywhere he wants.
Yeah.
And Darwin's like, there's like 6 black cards in there, and there's 11 red cards in there. And then we go through and they're right, you know, and then in this one, there's this many, and then in this pile here. And we're sitting there going like, what just happened? Like, that wasn't even, like, what are we seeing?
Yeah.
So at the end of that, I said, you know, I'm just curious, because Tony cut those cards. Like, how could you know anything about those cards? Tony shuffled, so it wasn't even your deck, and how could you know the makeup of that packet that he cut? And I'll tell you next time. So 6 months go by, and I come down, and we do the whole lesson, and at the end of the lesson, I suddenly go, oh, that thing.
Yeah.
And he goes, well, it's 7 o'clock. Let's, I'm just kind of beat from the lesson today, so why don't we just do that next time? So another 6 months go by, and I come down, and now I'm prepared.
Yeah.
And I say, by the way, I know we're just getting started, but today, can we talk about that thing that Tony said? And he goes, oh, that's right. Yeah, remind me at the end of the lesson. So we do the whole lesson, but the lesson was really engaging. And I remember leaving and walking down the street going, I forgot to ask him that thing. So then like another year goes by, and I'm like, can we talk about that thing? And he goes, I think I've made you wait long enough. He did it on purpose. He did it on purpose.
Years.
And he told me. He said, I don't know, what fun would he be giving away? And listen, you talk about quality teachers. You know how he did that? I created 15 ways to do that trick.
Okay.
On my own.
Yeah.
I said, if this happened, he must have done this, or he must have done this, or maybe he did this, or maybe it was this, and maybe it was this, or here's a closest version I can come up to it.
So by
And
not
my
telling you-
creativity went wild for a year and a half.
Yeah.
If after he showed me that, he said, sure, I did this, I never would have my brain never would have
Even arrived at those things.
thought, why would I give myself more challenges if I know what the solution is? And anyway, nothing's going to be as good as the original solution.
Right.
So you're done. So that's the kind of teacher he was, knowing that was going to happen, allowed that to happen. He told me all of that, and it was crazy. So we would always do that. And then, of course, 3 years later, I'd fool him with something, and I'd say, maybe in 2 years I'll teach you. We got to that level where we could roast each other. And it was great. I knew I was good when he'd call me and say, you left your 3 jokers here, and next time you come, don't forget to take your shit home. Wow. I was like,
wow. Nice. So the willpower to get up and do it every day seems to be like the commonality between being a piano player, bass player, a card musician, a card mechanic.
I just did a thing about this recently. I forget I mentioned it. And it was an Ask Me Anything.
Okay.
And I learned this from a guitar player right here in New York.
Yeah.
Arthur Nielsen. I said, how come I can sit and play blues all day? And I can sit and study and transcribe Stevie solos, and I can transcribe and really figure out his intonation and do it. But when it comes time to transcribe a Mike Stern solo or something like that, I'm just like, I don't care. And he said, because you're passionate about blues.
Yeah.
And you're not as passionate about jazz. If you really were, you would sit and study until your fingers bled and you got it. But I had the passion, but it just wasn't the right genre. And the answer to the question is, if you're truly passionate, if it's really inside of you, you don't have to work.
Right.
You wake up, and make a cup of coffee, I sit down and say, what do I got to work on today?
Yeah.
And it's not a jail. Seinfeld talked about it. It's not a prison.
Right.
He was on Stern.
Yes.
And Stern said, isn't that like a prison where all day long all you think about is jokes?
Yeah.
And he said, you have to enjoy the prison.
You have to love
that
the
wasn't
work.
the line he said, but you have to enjoy that work.
Your blessing in life is when you find the torture you're comfortable with.
And when I'm come up with a trick I've done for 15 years, and I come up with the smallest little thing, and in that morning practice, I'm thinking, ooh, that makes it just this much better.
Yeah.
I sit back and I go, that's great. I've improved it yet again.
Do you have a warm-up routine in the morning?
No.
Just straight to it.
I enjoy a couple cups of coffee, and then I usually have a yellow. I'm for some reason hooked on yellow legal pads and a particular pen. They're always waiting for me, and I sit down and I say, here's the things I'm going to work on, and then I just come up with ideas. But that's focused practice, and then throughout the day I'm just messing around with cards. But I like that idea of just sitting down and working on what needs to be worked on, or prepping for a show or something like that. But it's not and all day long I'll be on a walk or driving, and I'll get my voice recorder out and say, well, here's a good idea, I can do this or this or this. And those silly challenges I have that come in on the internet, they're constantly keeping my brain ticking, though, because I have literally the world telling me things I've never even thought about.
Right.
They open up a comment section and there's like 400 people saying, okay, do this, and then this, and then this, and this, and this.
Like combinations of stuff.
And then at first you think it's ridiculous, and then of course my brain's like, well, wait a minute.
Yeah.
I mean, I could do that. You can't necessarily do this, but this is kind of doable.
Yeah.
And then I think, well, wait a minute, if I put this part here, this can get me to this, and then I'm only a couple steps away from this. So what's the missing piece? And then 3 days later, I'm washing dishes, and I say, that's it. I can. If I do that, it sets me up for this.
Right.
And then I'm gonna make the video and take the guy's money. But the point I'm making is though, whether I'm washing dishes or in the shower or running or driving or whatever, and sitting in a hotel room waiting 2 hours for the gig, your brain's ticking away, and it's not a bad thing.
100%.
So if it's your obsession, if you want to be better at piano, and it truly is your thing, you're going to get up and you're going to shed scales and do your thing. It's not going to be a challenge. Right. If you find yourself, I want this, but when I sit down to practice, I don't have the motivation to do it. Right. The secret is finding what is the motivation. And what is the inspiration? What is the thing that's going to inspire you to sit down and say, I'm not leaving this piano until I get it. If I hear a great bebop chop on my phone, I'll be skimming through and I hear somebody play some sick line, I'm like, straight to the piano. Yeah. And I don't leave it until I get it.
Yeah.
And I'm like, I can see his fingers, it's right there. And I'll sit down for 15 more minutes and I just feel like I upgraded and unlocked a great way to get into a 251. You do this little thing I mean, similar to the one I know, but it grabs this little thing and that's really sweet. So for some reason, when I hear that bluesy jazz thing, I say, I'm going to do that. If I hear a hard, too far into outside kind of thing, I have no interest, I just keep skimming.
Yeah.
You know, inverted C major, F sharp major, this arpeggio's up, this arpeggio's down, this arpeggio, and they fly through. It just sounds so outside and so fusiony. I don't know. But something blues and jazz, I'm going to sit down and do it immediately. Yeah. So for that person struggling, you may have to find a mentor. You may have to find a new artist. You have to find an Instagram page. You have to find something that you look at that and go, that's what I want.
I think something I know as a musician, I went to school briefly, although I never graduated. And one thing that's constant for musicians, like if you even ever go to school, is like taking a lesson after the age of 20. It never happens. The art of having a mentor is something that is very much 20, 30 years ago. Like, I don't meet anyone under the age of 30 who can say, yeah, I've been with this person for 10 years.
I think the internet's hurting that because they feel like online, I'll take this online course. That's not a mentor, it's a one-way street.
Exactly.
This guy's saying, do this, this. But a mentor relationship is I can ask it and it moves with me.
Absolutely.
And instantly identifies the problems that I may be having, comes up with analogies to help, like a good golf teacher. They don't just say, do this or do this or do that. They'll have to find the right way to explain to this person that's different from the previous student.
Yeah, right.
And say, how do I break through to this guy for him to realize he's doing this too quickly?
Yeah, there's no one size fits all.
Yeah, exactly. So that mentor, that teacher has to recognize the problem, first of all. Yeah. And then because that person's been through every scenario of every possible permutation of anything in a golf swing, and then says, okay, this guy's just rotating too quick, or you know, he's got the face way out here. And so they can recognize that. And then what is the simple drill that I can get that guy to get his light bulb to go off? Because if it's your golf course that you bought on the internet ain't going to do that. So, and then do you really think that if it was easy as that, you could go take one lesson with Tiger and you'd be the new Tiger?
Yeah,
it's not. You have to have the back and forth. But I was very fortunate to have piano lessons at an early age and understand the relationship between my teacher and what I had to do. Right. Dan, my first piano teacher was just basic, you know, book one kind of stuff. But once I got to my first kind of real heavy-duty teacher with theory and everything, that I recognized that back and forth. I want to be good at this, and then, he fixed it. Right. And then to trust the process that for 6 days, I'm not going to be able to do this thing. And then suddenly, by magic, but somewhere between 8 o'clock at night on a Friday and 8 in the morning the next day, I suddenly can do the thing I can do. So now I knew that, just get it in your brain and it'll do it. And then understanding that relationship set me up for Darwin, that whatever he'd give me, I knew I couldn't come close to doing. But I trust that process, that if I just do it, it'll come.
That's the phrase, trusting the process. Yeah, I use that all the time.
It's just like, don't worry about, you went to the gym 5 days and you look worse and you weigh more, but don't worry about now. Quit. Just keep going. And then the big thing, the biggest thing about that transition, or that connection between music and magic, was all those years of piano lessons gave me a ridiculous fast track to cards
Fine
because I had
motor skills?
all the independence. So when he would struggle with another student, they couldn't move just their ring finger.
Yeah, exactly.
I'd just say, you mean like this?
Yeah.
So he'd say things like, you're not going to get this for 3 years, so buckle up, And I come back 3 months later
With it,
and of course I'm waiting for the praise, which never came.
It never came.
So I said, there
Right.
it is, and he'd go like, now let's work on this next part.
Right.
And it was always like I was kicked down, not in a bad way, but I felt like, here we go, now I got to set up for the next one. But I just trusted the process again and kept.
So literally
leveling up.
anyone watching this can go to CVS, get a deck of cards, and attempt to cut to, let's say, 23 cards down the deck. And I can attempt to do this, and I might get it right once every 50 times.
Through repetition.
Yes.
That is the secret, trusting that process. But I'll let you do it, so you can cut off a group of cards.
And how many?
Just wherever you want.
Oh, whatever one. Okay.
All right. So close to half, so it's not too hard. 29.
Okay.
1, 2, 3. You see, it's easy because you cut close to half.
Yeah.
1,
Sorry.
2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21, 22, 23, 24, 25, 26, 27, 28, 29. So practicing cutting in half is a big skill.
Right.
So if you look at it this way, and again, Darwin always helped me with the approach. It's hard to think about 29 cards, but it's easy to think about, here's what half is. I handle this every single day.
Right.
Here's just a little bit more. So a very easy shortcut for any piano people watching is we're not really talking about these huge chord extensions.
Right.
We're talking about this is a C13, and then let's put the third of that on top.
Okay.
So I'm not thinking about
Small
E, A,
details.
B flat,
Right.
B, and then E, G sharp, and B.
Right.
I'm thinking about that's a C13 and that's a third above C.
Yep.
And those little shortcuts, it's exact same parallel there,
Okay.
where you can take these little shortcuts. But people are going to say I got lucky. Let's do it again.
Okay.
Different,
So,
different. Don't cut around the middle. Or yeah.
There you go.
Well, that's easy.
Too easy?
It's 10. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, right? So that should prove beyond any doubt
Yeah.
that estimation is a huge part, but that's just knowing your instrument. And people say, that's ridiculous. How did he do that? There's some trick to it. Sit a piano player down, play 2 intervals, and tell him what's the distance between those notes.
Right.
It's clear as day.
Yes.
It's clear as day, but
Yeah.
that didn't happen on day one.
Of course.
And again, if there's musicians watching this, right? So we all
Yes.
know when I say Star Wars and when I say Wedding March and I say
Yes.
the NBC theme, and
Yes.
we know what we're talking. Okay,
Yes.
So I'm going to lose half the audience there. But they sat down and did that training, and I remember all that training, and I still have that training. I did those lessons for 2 weeks, and I haven't touched that stuff, but it's constantly in your head, so
Right.
we know it. We just know it. It's in it.
There was one Penn and Teller Flawless where they're kind of like, man, we don't really understand, blah, blah, blah. And they said, actually, we think you just did it.
Oh yeah,
And it was
I
a
know the
card,
trick you're
you know,
talking
the
about,
card grab, right, from the middle of the deck. So there is that like supreme level of
Fun fact about
repetition.
that.
Tell me.
That's on my channel 4 years before Kostya did it.
Oh yeah, I've seen it. I've seen you do it a bunch of times. But don't you also do a packet grab and like
All sorts of, it's just extensions of that. It's all the same
production.
principle. But that's what's so fascinating about the internet is convinced I can figure this trick out. That's what Fool Us unfortunately did for magicians.
Right.
Everyone wants to be in Penn and Teller's spot and say, I can figure this out. And I'll be the highlight of the comment section because I can figure this out. So they're looking for a trick.
Yeah.
And they've been looking for a trick forever. And suddenly I come along and there's no trick. I'm literally doing when I stack aces, I'm stacking aces.
Right.
I'm not cheating. They're
Yes.
in the positions they need to be in. When I'm cutting to cards, I'm cutting to cards. And so people are in the comments looking for the trick, and I hate to break it to you. It's not in my sleeve. It's not in the, magnet. Nobody's throwing it off. I'm literally catching the card.
Well,
So-
I didn't want to ask you to do a bunch of tricks because I really wanted to talk about the process. But seeing as this is my audience, not your audience, and I'm trying to re-educate them in terms of process, how about some ace stacking or something like that in terms of, you do a lot of gambling-centric performances,
Yes.
correct? That's like your main situation. You reference doing shows for poker players.
We'll try something. We'll give the cards a couple mixes. And do this. I can sense a little bit of an issue here, though. I haven't even really started doing anything yet, and all of a sudden, the mood changed. You don't trust me as much anymore. There's some skepticism.
I didn't trust you when we rocked up outside.
This isn't television. I can see you here. All right, here we go. So when I shuffle the cards like this, you can see that is a fair mix of the cards. You can see that's a fair cut.
Yep,
Still some distrust I'm sensing.
very much.
So I'll shuffle the cards like this, as a matter of fact. Half face up, half face down, because I don't want you to think that I'm cheating here. And in a moment, we'll have proof that these cards were shuffled. As a matter of fact, when you shuffle faces into backs, you know there's a technical term for that?
Tell me.
It's a mess. Try to keep up. All right, give the cards a couple cuts. As a matter of fact, since you still don't trust me, I'll let you look right here in the back, and you can see that is, you can look right behind me, over my shoulder, and see that is a fair mix. Yes?
Indeed.
And in case they don't trust you, I'll show at home. You can see faces mixed into backs.
Up and down.
So now that we know these cards are shuffled, faces into backs, would you be impressed if I could say, for example, cut to an ace? Would you be impressed if I could do that?
Very.
I'd say there's an ace right about there. I know, raw talent. But can he do it again? That's the trick.
I'm hoping.
Secret is just basic math. If I cut 28 cards, 11 cards, and then 13, I should find a second one. Now, I know what you're thinking. You're saying, okay, he's good. But maybe he didn't shuffle those cards enough faces into backs. So I'll shuffle again. I've lost count how many times I've shuffled faces into backs.
Many.
Maybe 4 or 5 times at this point. Maybe one more time. Faces into backs. Now, quick question. Do you want me to find this next ace easy way or the hard way?
I mean, it has to be the hard way.
Well, it's a
right?
trick question. There is no easy
There
way.
is no easy way.
But I'll close my eyes, turn my head. Should be an ace right about there. Now that leaves one ace left. Of course, I found the club, the diamond, and the spade. If I cut near the top of the deck, I mean, the cards have been shuffled faces into back so many times, I could find a face down or a face up card. If I cut near the middle, I can find a face up or a face down card.
Yeah.
So rather than try to cut to that ace of hearts, I think it's easier to riffle one time and turn all the cards face down. I mean, it's just easier for me to do it that way.
I'm sure.
You know, it feels like just
Incredible.
clean up the deck.
That's what I'm talking about. This is like, my audience is mainly bass players. This is like Jaco Pastorius at absolute peak, mid-70s, I would say. And the importance for me, my analytical brain goes right to it. I don't want to give anything away, of course, but the element of being in the room is so important.
Oh, yeah.
I'm talking about, like, especially for music audiences, so much content is consumed online.
Watch it. That's what I was just getting. Took the words out of my mouth. Watch a huge concert, 1994 Pulse, Pink Floyd, and you're watching it on a 3-inch by 4-inch box. Right? Yeah, exactly. With your little stupid headphones in, and then be there.
Yes.
And the energy of that many people together, and Gilmore comes out, and that light comes down from the thing and opens up.
Life changing.
It really was.
Yeah.
It was. He's hitting every note, and then all of a sudden the solos. He's improvising. You know, and you're thinking like, oh my God, he's doing stuff I've never heard him do before because I've never heard the solo extended this long. And then that crystal ball comes down, and that's amazing.
Yeah.
And it's huge. It's like the size, it's giant. We're in an arena or a stadium, Foxborough. And then all of a sudden, every spotlight hits that.
Right.
And now, like, the whole place is, and he's up on the top, shredding away, and the band's going, and it's good. The whole full orchestra's going, and the flames, and all this other stuff. And then the ball starts to open. Yeah. And you're like, I'm still getting goosebumps. Yeah. You'll never forget that.
Yeah.
How are you watching it on this little note? You're sitting there at 3 a.m, laying on your couch with your phone on your stomach, and your hand behind your thing, 1 foot up in sweatpants, watching this. Come on. So magic, of course, is an interesting thing too, because there's a big wall there when you're at home going, cool, whatever, versus sitting right in front of it going, how is that possible?
Right. And the crazy thing is, like, I know like 80 or 85% of what's going on, and I'm sitting inches from the cards and don't see it. I mean, that's
I work hard to make that a thing.
Yeah, and I implore people to take that into their music situation and, really work on that. I've got a show to play. You've got a drive to make.
One last little thing for you.
Yeah, let's have a closer.
I'm just gonna shuffle the cards and give them a cut.
Yep.
And you remember those aces that were on top a moment ago?
Yes.
This is one of the hardest things you can ever learn how to do.
Okay.
When I shuffled the cards, my goal was not to mix those cards. My goal was to rearrange those cards so that when I deal, I receive the aces. It's not a trick. They were literally shuffled into position. And you walk away from that, so people watch that and say, it doesn't seem that hard. That's easy, 20 years of practice. But the whole point is to make it look that way. And that's what I loved about Darwin so much, is it looked effortless.
Yeah.
And he was so slightly arrogant about it.
Sure.
So you would just do it without really giving it much. He would just do it kind of without saying or mentioning how hard this is to do. And to me, I saw that and I said, I want to do that. And then I took his character and just ramped it up.
And to me, watching you as I have done online now for the first time in person, and I hope I get to come and see a show at some point, the full show, there's not that sort of mid-2000s flashy multi-cut, all this kind. It's realistic. It's what you expect when you go to a casino or you're playing a home game. It's like there's nothing flashy going on, but little do people know, like you just said, the 20 years that went into that.
It's a very quick analogy just to finish up.
Sure.
But I get that from Bond. Bond doesn't come in yelling and screaming, I'm going to do this and I'm going to do that. He's got it all. When he walks into that place, he's already figured out the accents without letting people know what he's capable of.
Right.
And so the internet ruined that again with that super flashy thing where everyone wants to copy that particular style.
Yeah.
And I ventured for that suspense stuff, that elegance, that class, humor to help everything move along quickly. But I want to let the cards do the talking. And that's kind of been my whole thing there. Let that do it, and I'll just go along for the ride.
Jason Ladanye, it's been one of the highlights of my year. Really,
well, thank you so
cannot
much.
thank you enough for taking the time. Check out everything in the description of the video. It's at Card Magic by Jason on every single platform. Have your mind blown. More importantly, go to a live show. Buy a ticket and go to a live show. You're on the road most weekends, all across the country.
All across the country.
Yeah, I implore you to go to a live show. This is ridiculous.